In this video we are going to take a look at the basics of building a Deathwatch army list aimed at beginners. First we will quickly look at what rules are relevant for building our first list. Second we will go through two important preparation steps that help with building our list. After that we will dive right into army building itself, with a 4-step approach that I usually take when building my own army lists.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video.
Before we dive into army building itself, first a quick look at the rules that will provide the framework for building up our army. Basically there are 3 ways to play Warhammer 40k: open, narrative and matched. The so-called matched play is to be considered the most balanced way to play Warhammer 40k. It is also the most restrictive one and the one you can expect to find in a competitive environment. For a general introduction, I recommend reading page 279 in the 9th edition core rulebook, followed by a short overview on page 280. What is important for our army building is that we must pick a battle size as well as organizing our army into detachments. The most commonly played battle size is the strike force at 2000 points. While it can be tempting to go lower as a beginner without access to a lot of models, it is worth noting that armies are generally balanced around 2k points. This is somewhat of a leftover trait from 8th edition. While 1k games seem to get more popular with 9th edition, it will be interesting to see how the balance around that game size will develop as all the factions get their updated codexes. What I do recommend even for beginners is to familiarize with both matched play and 2k points as soon as possible. Though if you're a bunch of regulars learning the game together, dropping lower in points as you build up your armies shouldn't be an issue. As mentioned before, it is likely to see an increase in popularity for 1k games in the near future. For the purposes of this video, we are focusing on building an army for matched play, with a strike force up to 2k points, organized into a single battalion detachment for the Deathwatch faction. While it is possible to take different detachments and or even multiple ones, sticking to this single detachment is in my opinion the most straightforward approach to building up your fresh Deathwatch army. With the rules covered, moving on to preparations. There are 2 things worth mentioning here. First, it is far easier to build an army list with an army building tool. 2 popular ones are Battlescribe, which is unofficial and free of charge, and the official Warhammer 40k app, developed by Games Workshop, which has an included army builder called Battleforge. What is worth noting is that Battlescribe has been around for a very long time, and the tool is quite advanced at this point. In contrast, the Warhammer 40k app has only been released last year, and let's say it had a pretty rough start. If you compare the two today, it is easy to dismiss the official app for the far more advanced Battlescribe. My personal recommendation though is to familiarize yourself with both apps, and if you end up going for Battlescribe, at least try to stay updated on what is happening to the official app. Now that Games Workshop has released it, I fully expect them to keep pushing it until it is more appealing to the general crowd, be it through extra functionality or other kind of incentives that would win people over. This is just my personal prediction, but I'm fully expecting a shift towards the official app mid to long term. The second point I wish to cover is the importance of having a plan when starting to build up your list. As a complete beginner, that goal might simply be to build up your first 2k points army around a somewhat balanced list that you can enjoy playing in a variety of settings. This is what we will attempt to achieve over the course of this video. But as your army increases over time and you get access to more options and multiple lists, you might want to look further and think about your own goals, the environment and also the meta you'll be playing in, and tailor your list accordingly. What I mean by that is that sometimes you may simply want to win. Other times you may want to build a list to bring your newest expensive Forge World model along. If you're planning against a complete beginner friend of yours, maybe steamrolling him with the latest tournament list is not going to provide such a good experience for either of you. If you are more of a competitive player, then you want to be informed about both the global and your local meta. This includes what armies are popular, what works well for your own army, and what your opponents are most likely to bring along. With this slightly longer introduction out of the way, let's finally get going and move on to list building. As previously mentioned, the goal is to end up with a balanced list that can be used in a variety of settings. For me personally, this includes being able to play the missions, making use of the Deathwatch toolset, having both ranged and close combat capabilities, having access to utility, more on that later, flexible deployment, and or units that can cross the table fast, as well as having a variety of units that speed up getting familiar with 9th edition and the game in general. Potential cons of this kind of list are that due to being a jack of all trades kind of list, you might end up being unable to deal with more specialized lists, but I think that on a beginner casual level, this should not be an issue. So, having set up our army building tool and selected our Deathwatch battalion detachment, what I always do is starting with what I consider the auto-includes. Now, auto-includes are commonly referred to strong picks for a faction, but I don't exclusively mean that for the purposes of this video. An auto-include can also be the mentioned new model you absolutely want to bring along and or units that work particularly well in the kind of environment you play. For me personally, I have the following auto-includes. The Chief Apothecary hardly comes as a surprise. This is one of those auto-includes because it's an incredibly strong unit. I think this one has been covered extensively before, but in case you are looking for more information on why it is so good, feel free to check out my guide to the Elite Battlefield role linked in the description. While I generally bring the Primaris version, the Firstborn one can also be an alternative if you desperately need to free up 5 points. My second pick is the Spectre's Killteam, and this one might come as a surprise. The reason for this is that I want the combat squad of infiltrators. With their deep strike denial bubble and concealed positions, I think they are just too good utility to not have. I am including the Helix Adept and 4 Eliminators as a second combat squad because I like the idea of having the second deep strike denial bubble without having to invest into another 5 infiltrators. With characters being very important also in the current edition, I like having the Eliminators along. However, I see this pick as sort of a points reservation more than a final pick. If I had to seriously drop points later on, I would likely remove the second half of the Spectre's kill team and just roll with the initial 5 infiltrators instead. Those I won't ditch. As a third selection, I include a captain with jump pack, Xenophase blade and a storm shield. He will end up costing 130 points, which is exactly the same as a Watchmaster, which means regardless of which one I finally take, the points are already reserved. This will be our primary source of hit rerolls. As the final pick for now, I take the Librarian with Phobos armor. An alternative would be one with the jump pack. One of my goals is to have access to invul saves and or feel no pains for the army. The Librarian has ways to do this. So has the Chief Apothecary and of course also the Captain with the Storm Shield and the Dominus Aegis relic. Speaking of which, I already pre-reserve an extra relic, as well as double warlord traits on the captain, as well as one each for the librarian and the apothecary. After having made all of these selections, I am now at 599 points and 8 CP, down from the initial 12. As far as CP is concerned, it is quite common for Space Marine armies to invest pre-game, as we have strong relics and warlord traits. Personally speaking, I like being around 8 CP, which I consider a good middle ground between spending pre-game and having CP available during the game. If you're a beginner, don't be shy on spending CP pre-game. It might even be easier to play that way at first. With my personal auto-includes done, I'm now looking at getting the detachment requirements out of the way. For the battalion, we need to include a minimum of 2 HQs and 3 troops. While some armies might think of this as a troop tax, for the Deathwatch this is a non-issue, with our Killteams counting as a troops choice. While it is not strictly required to include Killteams in a Deathwatch army, it is one of the unique features of the faction, and in general I strongly recommend doing so. For our particular list, we are already meeting the requirements of 2 HQs and we have 1 out of 3 troop slots filled. This means that we are going to include 2 more kill teams. We have plenty of solid options when it comes to these, and if you haven't checked out my guides to the different kill teams yet, I recommend doing so. They are linked in the description. For the first choice, I will go for a strong ranged kill team, the Indomitor one with 5 heavy intercessors and 5 plasma inceptors. At a total of 415 points, that one is certainly not cheap. For the third kill team and final mandatory troops choice, I could go for a Forest kill team with 5 intercessors and 5 outriders at around 355 points, or stick to a more affordable Proteus kill team ranging anywhere from between 270 and roughly 325 points, depending on the options. For now, I'm putting the most expensive choice, which is the Forest kill team, more as a way to reserve the points rather than to come to a final decision. The main goal here for the third one is to include something mobile into the army that can cross the table easily on their own and be a nuisance. From this point on, the requirements are met, and we can now proceed to fill up the remaining points. With a bit more than 600 points available, I am now going for a selection of what is generally perceived as strong Space Marine unit picks. As we have added quite some ranged firepower already, I'm including a Redemptor Dreadnought as a solid all-rounder with both ranged and close combat abilities. Dreadnoughts have received major boosts in 9th edition thanks to their built-in Duty Eternal, as well as getting the core keyword. If you happen to have the old Start Collecting Deathwatch box with the Venerable Dreadnought, this one would make for a cheaper but less performing alternative. A Dreadnought is the kind of unit that helps provide threat saturation to a list, as it cannot really be ignored. As a second pick, I'm including a squad of 5 Blade Guard veterans, another high-performing Space Marine unit. They are great in close combat, one of the strong Indominus units that escaped the January FAQ points changes. As a strong and durable close combat unit, they are complementing our list nicely. Lastly, I'm adding a bit more utility to the list. One of my favorites, 2 company veterans with storm shields. They don't count as an elite choice, thanks to the captain being present, but even if they did, we still have plenty of elite slots left. The company veterans are great for their bodyguard special rule, as well as a cheap unit to do actions with. For more information on how to best use company veterans, check out my guide to choosing the command squad, linked in the description. With all these picks done, we are now already at 1777 points. This can now be used to close any further gaps or to bolster the already existing units. I choose to do the latter by adding another HQ, the Primary's Chaplain on Bike, as a support for the Biker Kill team, as well as another character, the Company Champion. By adding the latter, I now also have the option to move the Dominus Aegis relic to the Champion rather than the Captain, for instance if I wanted to bring a Watchmaster instead. He can also heroically intervene and is excellent against other characters. By adding some stone bolters to the company veterans, I'm basically filling up the list as close to 2k points as possible. I then proceed to pick all the warlord traits and double check if the relics are where they are supposed to be. Now, this list ended up being quite character heavy. This is where the company veterans might come in handy. Another thing to note is that the kill teams are pretty expensive. Overall, this list has few but valuable models. This means that every loss will hurt, and is recommended to add additional protection to units such as Outriders and the Inceptors. For this particular list, I would most likely leave both the Fortis and the Indomitor kill team intact, with the cheaper models shielding the more expensive ones. The Fortis kill team can wander off with the Chaplain on bike, with the Librarian potentially giving the kill team the additional feel no pain from Fortified with Contempt. The Indomitor kill team would castle up under the protection of the Dominus Aegis relic, with the Captain and the Apothecary and his feel no pain, healing and resurrecting. The Bladeguard veterans and the company champion can push back in close combat, and there is potentially another layer of protection from the company veterans if their bodyguard ability would be required for the characters. Otherwise, they can be sent into corners and or play action monkeys. The castle is used to contest the midboard objective, which is what Space Marine armies are generally good at. The two combat squads of the Spectre's kill team have flexible deployment, though I would keep one in the back for max coverage of their deep strike denial bubbles. The Dreadnought can be deployed as needed, with the option to even put him into the Teleportarium. There is of course also the Beacon and Chalice, which could be used to help a slow unit like the Indomitor kill team to get to the midboard faster. With this list having relatively few models, it is easy to get started with. However, one downside might be that it simply cannot cover enough ground. As previously mentioned, while building this army, we went for the expensive picks. What we could do instead is take a step back and build around including 4 kill teams instead of just 3, and with that, more models overall. In order to do this, we are changing the Indomitor kill team to 5 heavy intercessors, 4 eradicators and 1 plasma inceptor. It is now worse at clearing hordes and better at dealing with heavy armor, but will have more points to spare for additional firepower. We keep the single inceptor to allow the kill team to fall back and shoot for once in P in case the opponent is trying to tag them in close combat. We are also dropping the Fortis kill team and the company champion. Instead, we are including 2 Proteus kill teams as following: Deathwatch veterans with bolt guns and storm shields for both of them, with one having 5 Vanguard veterans with jump packs, Lightning Claw and Storm Shield, the other one having 1 Vanguard veteran with jump pack and 4 veteran bikers. Both of these will make use of combat squads. In order to bring the list down to just below 2k points, we'll have to drop 1 Bladeguard veteran and the Stormbolters on the company veterans. The good thing about the units such as the Bladeguard veterans is that they perform great at 4 instead of 5 models as well. What we have gained now are far more total bodies, all split into combat squads with OPSEC. This includes 2 times a Deathwatch veteran combat squad with Deathwatch bolt guns, which have special issue ammunition and a storm shield, 1 combat squad of Vanguard veterans that we can deploy with jump packs, and last but not least, a single Vanguard veteran and 4 biker mixed combat squad. The bikes retain the infantry keyword thanks to the single Vanguard veteran, allowing for some additional movement tricks. Just as before, the bikers can be kept with the chaplain, the librarian can give them the feel no pain, while the castle largely remains intact. This kind of army can cover more ground, yet still retains access to invul saves and or feel no pains. Between 4 kill teams, we also have a lot of OPSEC to contest objectives with. Obviously, the exact kill team compositions can be adjusted as needed. This style of list combines multiple decently performing Space Marine units and offers a balance of ranged and close combat capabilities, as well as utility. There are units present for all the different phases of the game. There are Deathwatch specific stratagems and even special issue ammunition when including a Proteus kill team. It also makes use of mixed units in the different kill teams. Even when playing a minimum amount of matches, this kind of combination ensures that you will learn about the essentials of both the game and the Deathwatch faction. To wrap things up, aiming for a matched play Strike Force army at 2k points is a great mid to long term goal even for beginners. Picking a battalion detachment for the Deathwatch synergizes well with their kill teams counting as troops. Before getting started on the actual list, picking an army builder tool and having a goal in mind can make things easier. How I personally go about building a list is that I start with the auto includes, which are the units I absolutely want to have in this specific list. I then proceed by meeting the battlefield role requirements, which are 3 troops and 2 HQ slots for a battalion detachment. For a somewhat balanced list, I try to get a good mix out of both ranged and close combat units, then complement them with support and utility that adds both to their offense as well as defense. I then proceed to add units that fill any potential gaps still present in the list. While a Deathwatch army is pretty flexible thanks to their kill teams, some of them can become quite expensive, which will result in a list with comparably few units even for a Space Marine army. This can be an advantage both on the table, for instance when trying to protect them with additional invul saves and or feel no pain, but also when collecting, as fewer overall models need to be purchased. However, especially by including multiple Proteus kill teams, even an elite army like the Deathwatch can bring a considerable number of models to the table. Over the course of this video, we have looked at 2 possible examples. Adjust to your own playstyle as needed. So that's it for building an army list for beginners. What kind of lists have you come up with so far, and how have they been doing for you? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have been enjoying this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again, and see you next time.